Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, who sits on the Armed Services Foreign Relations Committees, as well as the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, all of which are very key in these confirmation hearings unfolding this week. Senator, good morning. Thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
You bet, Jim.
You made some headlines this week for your contentious exchange with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth during his confirmation hearing. I want to play some of that, talk to you about it.
You have admitted that you had sex while you were married to wife 2 after you just had fathered a child by wife 3. You've admitted that. Now, if it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
It was a false claim then and a false claim now.
Many of your work colleagues have said that you show up for work under the influence of alcohol or drunk. I know you've denied that, but you would agree with me, right, that if that was the case, that would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense.
Senator, those are all anonymous false claims, and the totality
they're not anonymous.
The letters on the record here.
They're not anonymous.
On the record,
we've seen records with names attached to them.
Senator, has anything changed to ease any of your concerns about Pete Hegseth's nomination?
I have deep concerns about the character of the individual, not about his military service, which I think was strong, but his character, admitted serial infidelity, significant allegations of creation of toxic workplace culture, especially for women staffers, fiscal mismanagement of organizations, and allegations of a sexual assault that at a minimum was infidelity, but also led to a sexual assault allegation. I walked into the hearing with questions. I walked out of the hearing with more questions.
And my understanding is that Pete Hegseth did not meet with very many of the Democrats on the committee. You only got one round of questions when typically there are multiple rounds of questions. It sounds like you have more questions.
This was a very serious alteration from normal practice, Jim. I've been on the Armed Services Committee for now more than 12 years. Multiple secretaries of defense have been nominated by presidents of both parties. They always meet with committee members. Pete Hegseth refused to meet with any Democrat other than the chairman, Jack Reed, would schedule meetings, looked for one for me, then postponed it until after the hearing, and then postponed it again. I don't know whether I'm ever going to get a meeting. And so when you don't have the opportunity to meet with somebody in the office and share your concerns, and then you just get 1 7-minute round, you got to go right to it. But it's very, very difficult to get the full information you need about a position that is so important as Secretary of Defense.
And Senator, you sit on the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, or HELP Committee, which will hold Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s confirmation hearing to run the Department of Health and Human Services. Are you going to be meeting with him? Are you going to get stiffed on that meeting too?
No. I mean, Pete Hegseth is a unique case. RFK Jr. is coming to my office this afternoon to talk before the hearing, which will likely be next week. Senator Rubio, the nominee for Secretary of State, came to my office to talk before we had the hearing yesterday. I'm going to be meeting with the Secretary of Labor nominee later today. These individuals are meeting with the Democratic members of the committees that they'll be before, with the exception of Pete Hegseth.
And I want to get your reaction to Trump Attorney General pick Pam Bondi's confirmation hearing yesterday. She clashed with some of your colleagues over issues, including her answers about Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 election, possible pardons for January 6th rioters. Did any of her answers concern you? Will she have your support for Attorney General?
Yeah, Jim, that one, I was so steeped in confirmation hearings for Senator Rubio yesterday that I didn't have a chance to really follow live the Judiciary Committee's hearing on Pam Bondi. So I need to go back and watch that and talk to my colleagues. I did see the reports about her being very equivocal about acknowledging that Joe Biden legitimately was elected president in 2020. That would raise a major red flag with me if she's buying into bogus conspiracy theories about that election.
She did say at one point that there will not be an enemies list at the Department of Justice, but are you concerned that there will be an enemies list over at the White House?
Well, it sounds like they're preparing one at the Pentagon because Pete Hegseth has weighed in support of the notion of these military purge boards, as they're calling them. I don't have any doubt that the president and his team have lists of folks that they like and lists of folks they want to kick out. I was glad to hear that Pam Bondi said that would not be the case at the Department of Justice, but it's odd that that even has to be a topic of discussion. The fact that it is tells you that this is a most unusual incoming administration.
And the house cleaning may not be just happening at the Pentagon. We're hearing that Mike Turner, the Republican chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, is getting the boot. I know you're over in the Senate, but does that concern you?
It makes me wonder why. You know, I'm not on the Intelligence Committee, but my Virginia colleague, Senator Warner, is, and I think he's had a pretty good relationship with the intel leaders, both Democratic and Republican, on the House side. I was very puzzled to hear that Representative Turner has been moved aside. I don't really have an understanding of it. I'm sure Senator Warner is going to give me his take on it when I see him later today.
And Senator, I do want to ask you about the ceasefire agreement reached between Israel, we are told, between Israel and Hamas. Are you concerned about this delayed vote in Israel's cabinet? We were just talking to the ambassador about this. It doesn't sound like they're at the goal line yet. It sounds like there is still some negotiating going on.
Well, Jim, first, when we heard the news yesterday, we were in the middle of the hearing with Senator Rubio. The reaction in the room, all parties, everybody in the room, was celebratory. We're not there yet, but we need to get the hostages released. It's been so painful to see what's happened to them and to their families, and it's been painful to see the suffering of innocent Palestinians who have nothing to do with Hamas, who've suffered in the last 15 months. We got to get to that ceasefire and then look for a way to make it permanent with humanitarian aid, security for Israel, a future for Palestinians. But we're not quite there yet, and it's been tantalizingly close. I do think we're close. You do see there were some protests from the right side in Israel last night not liking the release of prisoners, but as the ambassador said, Israel is willing to make some difficult concessions in that regard to get hostages home, and those are the kinds of things that have to happen in a tough negotiation. So I'm choosing to believe that we're on the threshold, and then if we can get it, then we really have to put our shoulders to the wheel to turn it from a temporary thing into a permanent thing.
And Senator, forgive me, I'm covering a lot of ground, but President Biden did address the nation last night from the Oval Office. He talked about his fear that an oligarchy is taking over this country, that there's a tech industrial complex that has too much influence in this country. He offered some pretty stark warnings for the nation as Donald Trump is about to return to the White House. What did you make of that?
You know, the comments really echoed in my mind. It reminded me of something, and it reminded me of what President Eisenhower said as he was leaving office. This general who led us to victory in World War II warned America that a military-industrial complex could have too much impact on American politics and push us into needless military expenditures and even hostilities that we shouldn't be in. Those were very prescient words then, and I don't know if President Biden was sort of consciously echoing those or not. I know he is sincerely worried about it, and I think a lot of Americans are.
Do you think there's an oligarchy that's taking over in this country?
You know, I am worried about the power of these of the tech bros who, you know, have a lot of time on their hands because they have so many billions and they want to get involved in politics, and they usually want to get involved in politics to feather their own nest. They usually want to get involved in politics to help craft a tax bill that will give even more money to them and their friends. So stay tuned to see what the Trump administration's tax proposal is coming up in the next 2 months, and I think you're going to see a tax proposal that will benefit people like Elon Musk to the detriment of everyday working folks.
All right, Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, thank you very much for your time.
You bet.